But to model it a little better, I would sort of, as I said, take reference. And then, again, I have the luxury of having been to animation school, so I know what I want when I'm looking at a shape. When I get a facial rig from one of our guys and it has a mouth shape, it's really easy for me to look at it and tell him right away why an animator's not going to like that, because I've had animation training. Now, not everybody does, so you kind of have to try to think of not just what it looks like anatomically, but how are they going to use it. For this, for example, let's see, what's a good one? Mouth scrunch. Okay, here we go. So when I turn on the mouth scrunch, it kind of like scrunches his mouth to the side. So when somebody's modeling this shape, they have to say, okay, well, anatomically, I kind of have to figure out what's going to happen with the nasolabial folds and the deformations on his face and that sort of thing. That's obviously very important. But they also have to think, what the heck's an animator going to do with this? Are they going to use this? And why would they use it? In what situation might an animator need to turn this on? And in that situation, am I making it in a way that it's going to be useful to them? So that's sort of what I keep in my head to help me when I'm making those shapes, John, and just really sort of try to get into the head of the animator and make sure that it's going to be useful to them. As far as visually, I mean, I guess the only real tip I can give you is to just get a lot of reference of it. Make the shape. Get a mirror at your desk and make the shape and figure out which parts of the skin are moving to make them better and that sort of thing. All right, next question. Tomas asks, how do you rig sticky lips? Typically we would use a blend shape if we can, because sticky lips are something that's incredibly, they're so dependent on the actual verts meeting up and looking really nice, that to do sticky lips in a nice way really requires a nice blend shape. However, if you don't have blend shapes available to you, for whatever reason, that's one of the reasons we put in the second layer of controls in here, so that it's not perfect, but the animators can really get in there and sort of have this fine control without moving the entire lip around. They're not needing to move the geo down here to make this part of the lip move, which gives them the ability to sort of fake sticky lips when we don't have blend shapes available. The flip side is that it requires 6 extra joints just for this one section of the mouth, which again is, that's a tough sell to the programmers. But it does work if you don't have blend shapes. Okay, let's see. What is the ideal number of joints to create a good facial rig? I've seen facial rigs that range from 24 joints to 96 joints. The ideal number, in our experience, is 64. And I can give you an actual real answer for that, which is cool, because we've done a lot of sort of experimenting and trying to find the best way to do it with joints. 64 is what we came up with, and that includes the head and the neck, so 62 joints on the face and everything. Now, if you go above that, it's it can get better. You can get certain areas can be better. For example, this guy actually only has. This is another thing I don't really like about this rig that I want to fix, is that if you look at this guy's eyelid control, he's got a fold of skin that's unfolding as his eyelid rolls out, but there's no way to control that fold. It's happening by a corrective shape right now. So if an animator wanted to actually control this area in here, they can't do that. And that happens a lot. I mean, it's one of those things as a rigger, you're like, well, it looks great, that's cool, done, ship it. But the animators are like, no, I need to control this. And you're like, come on, really? But that happens all the time. So it's something that even though you've got this like super nice unfolding motion with that mesh there, they're still going to want more. So that's a place where I would like to put another joint there, or even 2, maybe like one here and one here, to sort of be able to do this sort of motion to make it nicer. I've seen I've seen a few facial rigs where people rig the eyelids like this, where they've got, instead of a joint in the middle of the eye, they've got joints kind of more on the surface of the eyelid, so they control them with more of a translation. And our animators typically hate that. And take that however you like, but that's just some little piece of knowledge I can give you, that any rig that we've used where the eyelids are controlled in this sort of way has not been received well by our animation team, just because it's way more work and they don't really get enough bang for their buck. They've got to do 10 times as much work to make like a simple blink, but it doesn't look any better, and they don't, the control that they get isn't where they want it to be. So that's kind of how that goes. Let's see. Who's got a hand up? Let's see. Oh, it's gone again. That's interesting. I'm kind of new to this GoToWebinar software, so bear with me. Okay, so let's see. Matt says, you mentioned the Bishop rig from Animation Mentor had presets for face shapes. Do your animators hate stuff like that too? Would you want a setup that works for both? In our line of work, where we are tasked with taking the performance of an actor and putting it on a character, typically presets get you in trouble, because unless those presets are based off of the actor that you're trying to replicate, they're not going to look right, and thus they're not going to be useful to the team. Now, someone asked a question earlier if it was better to make a rig that was more generic, that could be used in a wider variety of situations. And in the case of the Bishop rig, where you've got thousands of people animating it in completely different ways, then presets are great because they can be used and then people can build off of those. But in the case where a single character is being used and animated from a single actor, it's less, it doesn't help you out that much unless, as I said, unless those shapes are built off of that actor. And even when that happens, for example, we did a project where we scanned the actor and then built the facial rig off of those scans, and then that rig was animated by that actor. It still didn't work because the scans, 2 shots later, he makes a different face than what he did in the scan, and all of a sudden you can't make that face. So there's a lot of, we're constantly adjusting the way we do things and trying to find better ways. And, we've been a production house for 6 years, and our company's been around for 10 years on the research side. And we do purely facial rigs and purely facial animation, and we still don't have a perfect way to do it. And that's the best piece of advice I can give to you, is that there's no book out there and there's no method that's going to be the perfect way to do this stuff. It just hasn't happened yet. I mean, not to say that, maybe someday it will, and everyone will go, and it'll be like the perfect facial rig, and everyone will use that forever. But it hasn't happened yet, and I like to think that we're sort of on the cutting edge of facial technology, because that's all we do, and we take a lot of pride in that. And we're still, I don't feel like we're anywhere close. Like, we've got so much more things we can try and experiment with. So would I want a setup that works for both? That's kind of what we got here. You've got your custom attributes, but you've also got, another layer of controls that people can use. It works. You just have to be careful that people don't use everything, because if they use 20 channels to animate a shape when they can get the exact same shape with 3 channels, it's generally going to be cleaner, nicer animation, as well as less data if you're working on, for example, game engines. We've had some projects where they say you can only have 70 channels because our game engine just can't handle more data than that. So that happens a lot. You're presented with a limitation, but you've got to still got to give them everything they need to produce nice facial animation. Let's see. Okay, says, when you're using blend shapes, you can sculpt exactly what the art department wants for the character, but with bones and joints, deformation is somewhat more difficult to push the character with that amount of control, without 1,000 bones. Do I have a comment on that? Yeah, that's something that happens a lot. The kind of, the nice thing about analog controls with joints is that the animators can do whatever they want. But the bad thing about that is that animators can do whatever they want. So, it's a double-edged sword, as they say, because if animators are diligent and are working off of, a character sheet or they have heavy art direction and they're good, then they can, they won't abuse the privilege of being able to do whatever they want with a character and go off model and make weird stuff happen. The other end of that, kind of what we keep going back to, the main theme of this, is that with a blend shape rig, you can sculpt exactly what they want, but all of a sudden the animators are limited to just those shapes and just those sculpts. And, it's going to bite you later because it's going to look really nice 80% of the time, but there's going to be 20% of those shots where they can't even do anything close to what they are trying to hit. So it's kind of like finding the balance between those two. And no problem about your English, man. You came out perfectly. Oleg's saying, facial field in general in terms of the industry, is it a good field to study for future jobs? I would say right now, yes. Typically, for games, and I'm not sure if you're looking more just animation in general or for games or for film or whatever, but in games, typically no one ever cared about facial animation all that much, except for very few studios who had the budget for it. But typically, they'd put masks on their characters, or everyone would have a helmet on, or they're just framed, so you can't see their face because, people just didn't mind it that much. But there's been a few games coming out in the last year, and there's some on the horizon now that have just spectacular facial animation, and all of a sudden everyone's kind of perked up and said, oh, wait, we want facial animation like that too. So there's a lot more love going into the facial pipelines kind of in the productions that are starting this year and kind of getting rolling, which is super cool, which means that people with facial experience and that understand faces are going to soon be in demand. So that's nice. For feature, I think it's always an important thing, and I think, people in my experience, and correct me guys if I'm wrong, but like I don't have any friends who have worked at a feature house who only did facial animation. Like most of them did all, the whole thing. They did the body as well as the face. That is, unless of course it's something like a facial replacement where all there is to do is the face. But most of the time it's like a full body sort of thing. So generally you just want to be a kick-ass animator, and be able to do the face as well as the body. And for rigging is the same. People, one thing that kind of happens a lot that I've seen is that facial riggers are they're full body riggers who also do faces, and the opposite happens too. Like I would consider myself, I'm a facial rigger who also does bodies. Like my core competence is rigging faces, and that's what I can do. I can make body rigs as well. But my time and my effort and the time I spend getting better often goes into making better facial rigs. So is that valuable in the industry as a whole? Sure, I suppose so. I mean, I might have a hard time working somewhere where I'm going to do all bodies and no facial rigs because I kind of have the opposite skill set. But I think any time you have a specialized skill set is going to be valuable, whether it be facial or anything otherwise. You just have to find the right job. John posted a link to a Sticky Lips demo from Chad Vernon's site, which is really, really sweet. Now, I'll post the link in the forums afterwards so you guys can all check it out. It's definitely, all Chad's stuff is amazing. It's really fun to watch.